Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning to some of you, depending on your time zone. I want to welcome you to the ESL Ministry Training webinar. This is the first of two that we will be hosting. My name is Nell Green, and I am field personnel with the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. I work with the Internationals cluster, which basically that means your field personnel that are part of that cluster work with the diaspora, anybody who's not living in their home country but are living in a host country. And as many of you can imagine, especially since you chose to participate in this webinar, that means that teaching English as a second language is sometimes critical to our ministry as we reach out to internationals. I want to introduce you to Glenda Reece. Glenda is the interim minister to internationals at Forest Hills Baptist Church in Raleigh, North Carolina. And Glenda, welcome. Thank you for doing this, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Neil, and hello, everybody. I can't see anybody. I just see my words, so I'll just go from here. I wanted to start off with the basics of beginning an ESL program and teaching ESL in that program with my own journey. I thought that would be appropriate. It began when we moved to Natick, Massachusetts. We're living there. And my journey in ESL began in January of 1977 in the ice and the snow. And I agreed to take a 16-hour Laubach reading and writing workshop to teach illiterate Americans how to read and write so they could learn to read the Bible. And I had a little boy at the time, so I didn't get a motel. I drove there from Natick, Massachusetts 4 mornings in a row. And then I returned to my church after getting the training and began a one-person program at First Baptist Church in Sudbury, Massachusetts. And my first students were Spanish and French Canadians. I had to write my own lessons because the material that I had learned did not fit the international pattern of my students. And so I decided then that I would need more training and that I needed to work out lessons. And I'm sure that the very first lessons I wrote were probably pitiful. But I did the best I could. My students loved me. I loved them. The Spanish family began coming to our church. The French-Canadian woman was a member of our church when I began. And so this worked well. And then breaking all the rules for going to a leadership workshop because I had immediately started a program and nobody else was trained around us. I was sent to Samford University in Birmingham by what was then the Home Mission Board, and I took the leadership workshop. I became a volunteer trainer for my New England area. When I got back to, when I really got back from Samford, I also recognized that I was not happy with the material that was available at that point. So I ordered every book I could find, mostly from England, because England, of course, did English all over the world, and that's why it is all over the world. And I read and I studied and I read every introduction to every book I could get hold of. Believe me, now that I have internet, I realize how hard I worked to get all the materials. My husband's job transfer brought me home to North Carolina in 1978, so I was only working a full year in, well, it actually was a year and a half in Natick, Massachusetts at Sudbury. And then I came to Forest Hills Baptist Church as a volunteer in 1978. I want to say from the outset that church-based ministry trained me initially as a volunteer. And I have been a volunteer all the years since 1977. I've never not been a volunteer. But I began working in a refugee program here in Raleigh with Vietnamese and Laotian refugees. And from that, I began working in a public school ESL program, and I formalized and got all my degrees in ESL and in professional training. I say that because I began as a volunteer, and volunteering has been and still is the job that I love most. This webinar is really a mirror of what I have learned and experienced. The basics of beginning an ESL program and teaching ESL in that program, including much more than I can put in a webinar. But I can give you an overview. And this is written by me, and I kind of follow it along, and this is my story. We first have to have the vision. If we don't see the need and recognize that we are being called to fill that, and we are each one called by God to be active in His service, and I really believe that, and I try to live it. After we see the need and pray about it, then we have to act on that need. Seeing it, praying about it, and doing nothing does not solve the problem. As we act, we need to obtain support and help for that. For many years, our internationals and others different from us have been invisible to us. In 1981 or 82, I drove to Wake Tech Community College in our town and told them about the need for the Vietnamese and the Laotians to have classes. And they told me that there was no real need, and they would not set up a program because the need was not there, and in another few years it would be gone, and they didn't see any reason to do that. Currently, that is the largest program in North Carolina. And so I think finally somebody there saw the invisible people. But with the extensive and controversial news coverage of the invisible foreigner, international or undocumented persons, have become a really hot topic of conversation, and now we see them everywhere. We have to acknowledge that each one of us individually can make a difference. How we do that can be through prayer, simple kindness, and a willingness to help. The needs of the internationals are wide, great. No international is the same. And we have the abilities and the tools to minister to those God has placed on our doorstep. After all, we speak the language, and we know the system. Let's see, how do I get this thing to move now? Okay, the foundation of this is a foundation that I've lived with a long time. I met Lillian Isaacs in 1977 at the workshop leadership training that I took. She asked me about my prayer support and my team, and I didn't have a clue what she was talking about. She told me that I needed prayer as the foundation. This is a ministry bathed in prayer. You get 2 or 3 people to pray for you and help keep them updated on what you're actually doing. Be responsible as they pray to report back to them. And well, I went home to New England, and I have tried to do that all my teaching life. Also, the Scripture impels us to live better lives. I remember this scriptural foundation for the ministry, and if you can read it out loud with me, I can't hear you, but you can hear me. When a stranger resides with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. And I think this is important to remember, that Jesus was a political asylumee or a refugee, and so were Mary and Joseph when they were in Egypt. And so we have to keep in mind that that is important. That I see that we need to take. We see the vision, and then we act. I can't sit down. Well, if you know me, you know I don't sit still real well anyway. These 7 actions seem to me to sum up what we need. It is a tall order, and we spend the rest of the webinar working through this list. This is actually the meat of the webinar. We must acknowledge the need, recruit and share, train our people and ourselves, organize, build relationships, be willing to help, to move, to go, to do, and sustain enthusiasm and commitment with all the people that we come in contact with. And that means our students. If we get them enthusiastic, they come back. If we get our teachers enthusiastic, they stay with us. And so the first action is to acknowledge the need. Many Americans have never really spoken to a foreigner. Others have been in school with them and have just naturally as a start. Feel free to talk to people about your desire to teach ESL in a church-based setting. Often the first thing to do is to fulfill a requested need. In 1977, Nancy Hearn asked our church, Forest Hills, to help with a tutoring need for Arabic children. She was home on furlough from the Middle East and the Lebanese Civil War. Her knowledge of Arabic meant she was approached by Arabic-speaking families for help in the public schools and in the elementary school across from our church. From that year of tutoring, I moved to North Carolina in the summer, and Nancy was my very first phone call when I got to Raleigh, North Carolina, as soon as my phone was installed. So we joined together and began with an ESL workshop in, I think it was August or early September of that year. Our women's missionary organizations, youth mission trips, sponsoring refugee families, and other international focuses that we have today have sensitized many congregations to a commitment for a higher level and then to move on to an ESL program. This is pretty straightforward. Number 2, recruit and share. How many volunteers do you need to begin your ministry? Well, in Sudbury, it was me, just one, you. And in that small setting, I did it all, but I couldn't keep doing it all. And when I came to Forest Hills, I couldn't do it all because the need was overwhelming for us. And if you're alone, you can influence a few people. But if you have helpers and if you reach out and have other committed people, it can be a true ministry. For my part, when people ask me, what do you need to start a ministry, I always say key leadership. Without key leadership, it will not work. Many ministries have faded away when the key leader moves or is unable to continue. Recruit those who can become committed and become co-leaders with you, if at all possible. To start a ministry, that key leader needs to be the starter, the ignition for all of it. And then set a time for those to meet. Set a time to meet those who are interested. Help them take ownership of the vision. You can't be the only person with the vision. And if your people take ownership, then you have a partnership all through the time. And when you're sick or you have to leave or whatever happens, the ministry goes on. We have to always replace ourselves. Then go ahead and talk to the pastor and the mission groups. Have them pray about the ministry and perhaps discuss budget or financial help, whatever you might need. Okay, training is important to me. Many of you know that I am a conference leader and a trainer, and training is really important. I think a workshop is best if you can get help with it. Since I'm a trainer, I really believe this is the best way to begin. But it's not essential to start. You can know of a need. Perhaps somebody you know needs a driver's license, or fill out a form to get whatever they might need for a job, or to register a child in school. You can help with all that, almost like a tutor. You can begin to get a driver's license book and helping the international learn what to do. If they need help with forms, you can tutor them through the forms. I've done it many a time. But that's kind of a hard and frustrating way. Many places will send volunteer trainers, and you can join and make a workshop. Take it, make it, get people to come. This next slide will help you get an idea of what a beginner and intermediate student need to learn. I call this teaching on a shoestring. Now, I wrote this a very long time ago because I had to teach without a book. And I sat down one day and just cataloged the Band-Aid that I used when I taught about pain. I have a headache, or I have an elbow, I've broken my arm. I did all kinds of things with Band-Aids, with colors. I figured out a way to teach numbers. And so I just thought about what I wanted to teach, and that included elements of vocabulary, pronunciation, stock phrases, prepositions of place, memorized grammar. All of this you can teach. And I had a friend in Reedsville, North Carolina, who called me and said that a whole bunch of Hispanic migrants had come to her town, and her husband did prison ministry, and he was telling her that they had these new migrants in town. They weren't in prison or anything, but he was very concerned about them because they didn't speak English. And she had no money, and the church, was willing to let her have a room, or she could go out wherever the migrants worked. But she wanted to really help them. So I sent her the little thing I wrote about teaching English on a shoestring. It was just a list. And she told me she used that list for 2 years before she ran out of material. And she did what I did. She used what we call realia. If you're in the professional world, it is that, but it's just real stuff. If you're going to teach what a book is, you pick up a book and show it to them. And if you want to teach what a spoon is, you show it to them. So anything you can do that's real. When I teach clothing, I try to always have some real clothing there. And you can do this without it costing a fortune, and that matters. Now you can see on your screen a portion of the list. I've got a very long list of these, and you would have to be teaching, basic things like days of the week, months of the year, the numbers, members of the family, basic clothing, money. I really never had to teach internationals about money except the names that we use, like quarter and dollar and things like that. But most of them come in knowing money. And then their right and left, words we use and think about all the time and never think that they might need. But here's a portion of the list and of what a new student needs to begin learning. You can use a paper plate clock to teach time. Write numbers on cards, deal out the card numbers, and have the students say the name. If they have a 2 in their hand, they need to recognize that as a 2. If they have a 7, you don't want them to stop and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they need to learn the names of the numbers, not in order. Counting is when you put it in order. Learning the names is a different thing altogether. And you do the same thing with the alphabet. Teach them to write their name, their address, their phone number in English. That's the first lesson. And now we add email or whatever they might be using. Many do not speak English, but certainly do use email. Books and other things help. Under training comes books and materials. In our program in 1978, we generally wrote our own material. It is where I became a materials provider for many. But textbook publishers very quickly realized the market was there in ESL, and they began selling quality material. The current set I'm using is the Oxford publication called Step Forward. It has 6 books in its set, and I like it. A lot of people are using the Oxford Picture Dictionary or word-by-word picture dictionary. But all the 6 or 7 different textbook series I've been through in my teaching lifetime are recognized textbooks, and they're all good. I mean, you're not going to go bad at whatever you buy if you just use it and use it as a guide instead of as the only thing you can do.
Glenda, this is
we
Nell.
budget for books in our program.
Glenda, let me ask you a question about that. Would it
Sure.
be possible for you to make a list of those resources, and when we post the webinar onto the web, we can also post that list of resources with it?
And I can even let you post my teaching English on a shoestring if you want to post that.
That'd be great.
And I'll mention something else you might like that. So we'll talk about that, and I can get that to you pretty easily.
Great, thanks. So y'all can be looking for that after I get this posted.
Okay, the other thing is old programs like mine now often discard or give away books. At our conference, this state conference this fall, I plan to give away about 4 boxes of used books. I remember receiving a box of old books from a church in Texas when I was in New England. I was thrilled to have those, and I never forgot. In fact, one book I still have and go to. As your program begins and grows, you've got to organize it. Support comes from the greater church body when the ministry is organized. And if you're organized and keep the fact that the ministry is really happening and some great things are happening, then you get a level of support, and people are proud to talk about the special program they have in our church. Actually, a program generally has the same number of classes that it has teachers to teach. So in ESL Bible on Sunday morning, we currently have 4 trained teachers, plus an administrator. And our administrator is 19, and she does a great job, but she's not a teacher. When we get lucky, we actually get a pianist in there. Ideally, 2 teachers per class is great, but we've never been able to get 2 teachers for every class we teach. Teachers move in and out just like students do, and so the director and the teachers recruit other teachers or other people to come in. One of my best teacher recruiter is a college student. She's going to be a senior at NC State this year, been with our program for 2 years, and she's bringing teachers all the time in to try to learn to teach, and I think that's great. So that's what you have to do. But I have to keep up with attendance, email lists, and a schedule of events. And sometimes a person wants to help but not to teach. Buses, they can keep the list, they can do attendance, they can do all kinds of things that help you keep organized, and that's important.
So, Glenda, another question then. As you recruit volunteers, I'm hearing you say that you actually recruit from college students as well?
Oh, yeah, they speak English really well.
But you find they have time and they're willing?
I find that they get it so exciting. My college students came to me last year and said, "This is the best part of my week." And she says, "I won't take any classes on Wednesday nights because this is what I do on Wednesday nights." And people get excited about it. They get turned on to it. So I think that's a big deal.
And because I know of one of our churches that's on, they are contemplating having their ESL program on a Wednesday night. So you have found that that works as well?
Yes, in fact, the children of our people take place in. So we work on Wednesday night. We started on Wednesday night because that's where people were able to volunteer. And they were sitting around after prayer meeting waiting for their children to get out of missions programs. So Nancy Hearn started asking them if they would help with the tutoring. And then as soon as I came in and it became an ESL program, we were asking them if, since they had nothing to do that hour, would they come and work with us. And so we never messed with prayer meeting. You know, we always, only 2 or 3 of us missed prayer meeting while the rest of the people stayed in prayer meeting and came upstairs and then helped us. And that worked very well. Our youngest teacher is 19. Our oldest teacher is in her 80s, so up in her 80s. And they're all very good. Okay, I'm going to go back to organize. I plan for this semester. I have to plan for the semester because if I want to do a Christmas party or have vans or buses, then I've got to put that in our organization so that I'm the first person to get them. And otherwise, I don't get some of the resources that I might need. And so that takes planning, and that takes paperwork. Records are necessary, and transparency in those records is necessary. I tell everybody what I do. If you're in a church ministry budget, and we are now, we didn't start off that way, but we are now, you need to make a report to the missions council and to your church. Planning and running a ministry did not come easy to me. I just had to learn it. All I really wanted to do was teach.
Glenda,
I prefer email lists. Yeah.
We have another question here. One of the churches would like to know, on Wednesday nights, how long does your ESL class actually last?
It lasts an hour and 45 minutes. We begin exactly at 6 o'clock, and sometimes I'm over-eager at 2 minutes still. And we have to end at 7:45 because our mission programs ends and we have to get the kids out of the nursery. And so we do all of this every Wednesday night in an hour and 45 minutes. And we teach 2 full classes. One is a large group beginner-type class, and they do oral production and all kinds of beginner stuff as a unit. And then a large group, high beginner to fluency oral production class or pronunciation class. And I actually teach that. And then we break into 7 different levels of ESL for the small group class that goes from about 5 or 10 minutes before 7 until 7:45. Does that help? I'm going to go back to my spiel on keeping records. People ask, how many people did you have last year? And I can say we registered 167. As you know, they don't always remain in the program, so don't get discouraged because you have to remember that you have touched. This helps you when you need funding and when you need to make a report and all that sort of thing. The 5th part of your action is the culture and building relationships. I think that is probably the most difficult thing I have ever had to learn to do. I'm extremely task-oriented as a person, as a teacher. And because I'm so task-oriented, I find that the lesson comes first, the paperwork comes first, almost anything comes first. But in working with internationals, I found that the relationship and the love I show are much more important than what they learned in class. And that was a hard lesson for me, and I'm still working on it. But I have now many, many relationships, and I can say that I've moved along the spectrum from a task-oriented person to very much more of a relationship-oriented person, and it matters. As a task-oriented person, my conversation centers on what I'm doing. What am I doing? Right now I'm doing a webinar. We celebrate our busyness. I'm always busy. The task must be completed before we have time for people. And I'm learning that I have to schedule people just like I schedule tasks. I can always use the excuse of, but I have work to do. And I can get out of any party, get-together, or meeting with that. And it's an accepted excuse in America, and because we are task-oriented. We think we're friendly, and I always thought we were very friendly and very compassionate and very, relationship-oriented until I met them. And I found out that they would rather be together and have a good time, and the learning was good. so we have actually put a tea section in our ESL program on Wednesday nights, and we have 10 minutes of tea and cookies, and they all love it. And I think that gets them there more than anything else. I want to talk a little bit more about the culture, and for you to realize that the relationship cultures demand so much of us. I compartmentalize my friends. You know, I have friends that I go do exercise class with, friends in Sunday school. I have neighbors. I have old school friends. We compartmentalize, and that leaves little or no time for others. But internationals are more relational. So understand that that doesn't mean they're lazy. We hardly tolerate this relational attitude of spending a lot of time together, but it is the way of most of the world. Because they are more relational than task-oriented, we often say that other cultures are lazy, and that's just not true. They are not. But also, I want to encourage everybody to Google the culture of your students. You need to know what they know. They bring a lot to us, and we need to not be too caught up in our world to look up what they can bring to us. The Google information is a great resource. When I started doing this kind of thing, I had to order things from the Mormon Church. They were the only one that had the culture programs or scan things, and you can get those even today. IBM gave me their businessmen's culture stuff because I was a vendor for them. But now I just go and look it up on Google, and that helps a great deal. So
Glenda,
you need, if you've got a student coming in from Bhutan or some other country, look it up. Yes.
let me just give a plug here for our website. If you will go to cbfinternationals.org, we have all sorts of resources regarding culture there and regarding cultural sensitivity. So cbfinternationals.org for some resources.
Good. I like the plug. Be willing to help. And English teaching in the classroom, I think, is the easiest part. But when the student waits for all the others to leave and holds out the electrical bill and looks, you know, and asks you what that means, and then you are meeting their real need. I have spent many a half hour or hour later working through the late charges on electric bill. The last time I did this, it was helping fill out a form for something about a new citizen we had was having to do some passport form work, and she was just completely at odds with it. And we walked, you know, little square by little square through that form. They have questions you can't imagine. And so these are the ways that you really help them. They come with their needs, and adults have needs. My internationals don't have a clue what it means to bundle charges for TV and internet and phones, but they have to make decisions about that. So we teach bundling charges, and think about the way you live and what you struggle through, and that makes perfect lessons for large groups or small groups. But remember that all of these things, you speak the language, you can figure it out, and you can make the decisions. And then you can take that and wind it up into a great class. I am a citizenship trainer and have been since I had Vietnamese and Laotian refugees, and many of them need citizenship. Our Homeland Security Department has USCIS, and they give free training classes if you want to do this. And I have done that many times, and we just had those in North Carolina 2 weeks ago. Be willing to help. Relationship building comes from spending time together. This was really hard for me. I didn't want to give up my Saturday. Many students and visitors spend years in the U.S. and never get inside an American home. Our home visits are some of the most successful things we do. You can have a ministry that's activity related more than it's ESL related if you wanted to. We decided to take a day trip to Pilot Mountain this spring, and we were totally shocked at how many people wanted to go. Many could not drive, didn't have a driver's license, so they never had a chance to see our state. They didn't even know what was in North Carolina. We expected about 25 people, and we ended up with almost 60 people. Those that could drive took carloads, and of course we took our buses, our vans. They picnicked, hiked, took lots and lots of pictures, And we took those group pictures. They loved that. And at the discount store, and you know the names of them, we could have the pictures made for 13 cents a piece. So they loved getting the free pictures. I made pictures of everything they would send me and simply gave them away. And my highest bill for that has been $11 so far. So that's worth doing when it makes people happy and builds those relationships. We plan and budget all of our activities. My church is very generous, and we have a track record now of being very transparent, so they keep giving us money when we ask for it, and that matters. Money does help. And then I come to number 7, which is sustain enthusiasm and commitment. Choose to be happy. I have a campaign going. It's a 30-year campaign going against pickle-faced Christians. Smiles are contagious. Smile. And you really need to be the one who greets everybody with a smile. People need to be saying about you, they're always smiling. Fault finders are everywhere. But in a volunteer program, it has to be all about appreciation. No one pays us to do this much work, but God does. So for every complaint or criticism, you have to be willing to hand out 7 praises and thanks. It not only makes for a good marriage, it makes for a good international program or ESL team. And then pray and keep your commitment to God. Keep your cup filled so you have plenty to give out. Keep your relationship with God vibrant. Then be committed to the program, not just to that one student or that one group. When you get discouraged, remember why you serve. I did a large workshop this weekend, and I had a professional teacher come in, and in fact she's head of the teaching program for the adult ESL thing that they do at their university. And I didn't know her. She was new. That was the first year in the job. And so she came to my program, and I started off by saying, I want to know why you're here. I want to know why you bother to help internationals to learn English. And, you know, a few people said a few words. She didn't say anything, and I didn't know who she was. But later in the workshop, she came up to me and said, I thank you for this workshop because I've been pretty negative. And I found out that I had forgotten why I got into this. And now I'm not going to forget again. And it makes a difference. Remember that you're doing this for God. Be committed to the program. Sing, smile, pull yourself back to the ministry. Don't get discouraged. Don't let bad things are going to happen. You know it. Trouble comes. You just have to keep going. And then in sustaining that enthusiasm and commitment, I have a paper that was written by an organization probably in the 60s, and somebody handed it to me many years ago, and it has been a real pattern for my life, and the name of it is A Reason, a Season, and a Lifetime. And both students and teachers come for a reason. When that need is filled, they leave. And this is true of your teachers. They may come just to see what you're doing or just to see if they can do it. Students will come for a reason. Help me with my English. I can't get a promotion in my job. I need a job. All these things. These are the reasons they come. Some come for a season, maybe a year. Then they move on. A few come to your classes or teach for a lifetime of learning or service. Now, for me, this is a lifetime thing. This is normal. Some are going to be a reason, some a lifetime. We have a volunteer who's been with our church for 22 years. She's moving to Texas, and we are heartbroken. But her season here is coming to an end. We love her, and the hole she will leave is immense, but God will work that out. Students often don't want to change teachers or leave. I often teach an essay I have about a reason, a season, and a lifetime. Some of my students come for a reason, and they learned that part. They left. No fault of the teacher. Others come for a season. They are visiting scholars, or they must migrate for a job. Many students are lifetime learners and friends. They are gifts from God. So remember, a reason, a season, and a lifetime. We looked at this slide in the beginning. We talked about the need and you know, that long 7-point section concerning acting on the need. And of course, most of this comes at the same time. But now I want to talk about getting support and help. Getting support and help can be both easy and daunting. A returned missionary laid the groundwork for my ESL ministry. When I came in and did the first ESL workshop, I already had a small base of support. However, this was a new vision, no longer tutoring, and a new ministry, ESL. It was expected to burn out like the usual church projects. We had problems with the nursery people who had never had foreigners or people of color in the same nursery beds. It was a cultural revolution in 1978. Some young parents left our church. One pastor asked me when all this stuff would stop so I could just be his Sunday school teacher trainer. When I told him international ministry brought me to this church, and when it left, I probably would also leave, he stopped being negative. 20 years later, he came and asked forgiveness for his attitude and began working in our international ministry. He was very effective. Internationals do not bring money into the church. Some tell me they don't pay their way. I agree and tell them that's why it's missions. Americans are culturally different. We are not like the Chinese, but we are not always and often like the Spanish speakers. However, the differences can be bridged if we study the cultures, so do the workshop. I volunteered to do cross-cultural workshops in every group in our church that would give me the time. I worked with all the mission groups, the youth, the adult Sunday school classes, and the nursery workers. All learned quickly and began the road of loving internationals. Took a bit of work and a lot of smiling and encouragement. So, cross-cultural sensitization of the people you work around is really important. It's best if your church takes ownership of your ESL program. If they're proud of it, if they proclaim it in their documents, if they support those international activities and let other groups know they're doing it. So I ask you to think of this as a long-term mission endeavor. Meet with the pastor or others regularly, maybe every quarter. Report on those goals and happenings. Yes, this morning at 6 o'clock I wrote for the church newsletter. Write the stories of activities and good things that happen. If you're able to be included in the church budget and mission outreach, be transparent and a good steward of the tithe money. Look for ways to include Sunday school classes and others in events. We have had Sunday school departments that help host welcome dinners for students and host Christmas banquets. Include your greater church family, not just teachers and helpers in the ministry. Ask for prayer in meetings. One turning point in our early ministry was when a new widow told of her coming to work in ESL and how that made a difference in her life. She said she had a reason to live then. Other people volunteered to help after that. So I'm always looking for help. When somebody says, do you need help? My answer is yes. So now we come to the end of what I have written and have presented, and I have left time for questions, and I expect questions. So I'm on my journey, still doing it, still going. It's a great depth prayer ministry. It takes commitment, training, and a love for God's people. Questions?
Well, Glenda, this is Nell, and I do have one. I thought that was a great idea that you had about going to Sunday school classes and various groups in the church to give training and cross-cultural sensitivity. So a couple of questions. One, what kind of things do you deal with when you deal with cross-cultural sensitivity? And how's that received? You know, some people might think taking the Sunday school hour or something like that is not really an appropriate use of you know, morning church time. But tell me how that was received and the kind of things you dealt with.
It was received quite well. I have 9 points about where we're different in dress, different in foods, different in body odors, different in the way we shake hands or bow or kiss each other. Our greetings are different. So I had a long list of those, and I had them get up and do the distance, the space distances that are comfortable for people. For example, if you think about kissing and bowing and shaking hands, those are the 3 world greetings, but they take 3 different spaces. And since we shake hands, we think that's the proper distance between internationals or between any people in the world. But when I move in closer with the elbow to elbow, which is the Spanish distance, then the Americans become very uncomfortable because somebody's invading their space. And I have them do that in pairs in a Sunday school group or in a deacon group. And we all do it with a lot of laughter, but also a lot of understanding. And then, of course, we are too close to the Chinese or Thailand people, and so one person has to take one step back. And so we actually do some of this, together. And if you've been in a cross-culture workshop that I've done, you have actually taken part in that. And so I have that list of just how we're different and how we need to approach that. Learning styles are different. Many things are different. We even have different conversations. And so I do a thing called conversational ball games because we expect the students, when we put them in a group, to actually have a conversation. And they wait for the person who's the most status in their little group, and they do their monologue the whole time, and they don't ever open their mouth or speak. So we have to teach them to dialogue in English before we can get them to do a conversation corner or an icebreaker of some type. Does that help a little?
Yes, great. One of the things that just came through the chat box here, they'd like to know if you'd be willing to share that list of 9 differences, and
Sure.
so that, I'm assuming so that perhaps it can be shared with their ESL classes. Let me remind everybody that we do have a chat box down at the bottom, if you see that, and that's the way you can pose questions to Glenda. I'll be watching that so that she can respond. We do have just a few minutes left. We are going to end this in about 5 minutes, so we have a little time for her to do that. So feel free to pop your questions in there.
Okay, good. Well, yes, I would be glad to share those, but one of the easiest things to do is I have a DVD that was of me teaching cross-culture in Arlington, Texas in 2011. It's a pretty good DVD, and you can purchase that, I think, for $15. And I have a website, ESLTS.com, and you can see some of the things that I do there. But I do have a few DVDs that we've done of workshops that it'd be very easy for you to get. And
okay.
So I think Nell put my ESLTS.com website page up there, and you're all very willing to go to that. If you go to the section on the website that tells the places we've gone, and some of those places are underlined, if you click on the underlinings, then you will find all the pictures that we took for those different field trips.
One of the other questions, I think it's a really a great question, one that Butch and I deal a lot with, especially since we work a lot with Muslim peoples. How do you handle a situation where perhaps the man is uncomfortable having a woman teacher?
I find a man teacher if I must, and I have 3 really good ones. But in general, I have found that if I'm extremely professional with them, and if I sit a little bit further back, and I dress very modestly, I have no problem with the men. I really do, with the men, come off as professionally as I can. And so, in my business part of me, they hire me to come in there and teach them. So I don't have any problem because I try to be extremely modest in my dress, respectful of them, their customs, and very professional.
Yeah, great. Jack Kelly says that their Christian school has accepted 3 international students, and so they're adding an ESL class for them. So where can they get help finding curriculum? I think, is that some of what you might be able to share with us, a document with resources, etc., and I can send that out?
I'm going to try to do that. Okay. But he can actually go to any big publisher like Oxford University Press or Regents Press or any of those and get a list of ESL books. And I don't know of a current ESL leveled group where you have ESL 1, 2, 3, 4 that isn't very, very good. Okay. And in a Bible-based ministry, often, well, right now I know a Bible-based ministry that's using English lessons in the Bible, Book of Mark.
So just real quick, would you say again the name of the curriculum that you are currently using?
It's the Oxford University Press Step Forward. Okay.
And the other question I think would be a good one to pose, and I know that you might be dealing with this some next week, but well, on Wednesday nights you teach English, but it is at a church, and you are a faith-based organization. Do you integrate issues of faith into your class, or are you purely ESL?
It is purely ESL, but I use the thing like James Weldon Johnson's great poem, The Creation. I have a way of slipping it in without slipping it in, but when we don't manipulate students at all. We are very, very careful that if we're going to use the Bible or say anything religious, we make sure that that's in the advertisement for.
Okay.
Have many Muslims. And some of them will come for Bible-based learning because they need English so much. And that's one of the interesting things about being just transparent with the material that you use. But that Sunday ESL Bible, that's in the title.
Right. And so that's a good lead-in. We need to close this up right now, but could you just give us quickly a brief overview of the subject for next week?
I think it's for tomorrow, right?
No, it's for next Wednesday.
Okay, we'll talk. I'm going to do a whole thing on ESL Bible, how you write a class using a Bible-based approach. And so I will have that material up. It's ready to roll, and we're ready to go on that.
Great. Well, Glenda,
but it really is a teaching how you pick the nouns and the verbs out of your Bible verse or whatever you do.
Great. Well, Glenda, we thank you so very much. Jan is asking what website. Jan, are you asking the website for the webinar where it will be posted? If that's the case, the webinar and the resources that she's mentioning will be posted on the website I mentioned earlier, cbfinternationals.org. Glenda, we want to thank you for your time, for your effort, and this has been wonderful, and we look forward to next week.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
everybody.
Bye.